Originally from Los Angeles. Originally from Los Angeles, as we were talking about earlier. I spent about 12 years as a journalist. So initially living in LA, working in LA, I started working in Hollywood and entertainment and doing a lot of red carpets. Jeanette, you're nodding because you're an LA local, so you get it. And then as I started, I know people are coming in too. As I started kind of getting more into journalism, I started realizing like maybe entertainment wasn't for me. And so I ended up moving to New York City and I lived there for about 5 years. I got my master's in journalism, and it was there where I fell into business and entrepreneurship. Um, I know we have a couple people trickling in, but I spent about 15 years as a journalist. 10 of those years I spent covering personal finance and entrepreneurship. So I was interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners. I worked at CNBC, Money Magazine. I was the senior video producer there, where we did a documentary. We got nominated for an Emmy. But it wasn't until I worked for a brand called Next Advisor, which I'm not sure if many of you have heard. It only kind of existed for about 2 years. It was a brand in partnership with Time Magazine, but it was there where we were interviewing women entrepreneurs, like almost like these new budding entrepreneurs that a lot of very inspirational, aspirational storytelling. And I started realizing there that the power of the media was like so expansive. And I started noticing that the entrepreneurs that we were featuring in articles started getting a lot of notoriety, and they started growing their coaching practice, and they started growing their newsletter subscription. And it was then when I realized like, oh my God, the power of the media is like it's nothing compares to that. Right. You look at Business Insider and Annie, and I do publicity work for Annie as well, and we work together very closely. But Annie got featured in Business Insider, and Business Insider gets 104 million readers a month. Like that is something that social media really can't do unless you go crazy viral, right? On a reel or a TikTok. But it thrusts you in front of this insane audience when you land a media feature or you get featured as an expert quote, right? An expert source. It just elevates your credibility. It helps your SEO, right? SEO is search engine optimization. So it's basically how you show up in Google rankings. And the more that you get featured on Business Insider, or the more you start getting associated with media companies that are in your niche, the more Google's going to start recognizing you as an expert in Google searches as well. So there's just a lot to unpack. And I really, my message is like, the media is not this like out of reach thing for entrepreneurs. It really is tangible. It really moves the needle. And it can really expedite a lot of the business work that we do as entrepreneurs. So
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's such a fun topic. It's something that when I first started business, I felt was out of reach and a little intimidating. Like I needed to know what I was doing. And so I really have appreciated you breaking down how it works. But I think one thing I also want to talk about here in the beginning is what are the different types of media options? Because I know you and I have talked about this a lot, but there's, full articles that you are writing, there's being featured, there's TV interviews. So can you talk about the different types and when they're helpful for different types of business?
yeah, totally. So if you are a new and budding entrepreneur who has never landed media coverage before, I suggest maybe like let's get you a couple podcasts. Let's land you on a couple podcasts, get you featured there. As you start really building your skills as an expert, then we can start getting you like maybe some guest writing blogs. Business Insider is always looking for experts to write articles as well. There are TV opportunities where you can go on camera, and I know Annie, you and I talk about this all the time, where you can go on camera and you have a reporter there asking you questions, and it can be on Zoom and talk about, for Annie, it would be like any finance, especially with what's going on with the tariffs and the stock market right now. It would be those would be the types of articles or interviews that we would land for her. So there's a lot of different opportunities. Podcasts, you can be quoted as an expert source in an article. So if a reporter is working on a story about like, should you pull your money out of the stock market when it's so volatile, right? Then we would have an expert finance source that says, no, keep your money in, dollar cost average, keep investing because the stock market's so volatile. And that just gives you that expert credibility that not a lot of other entrepreneurs do. And then when people are reading those articles, right, like your target clients, then they start seeing you in there, and your hyperlinked is linked in that website, and it goes directed back to your web to your proprietary website. So it's super important. Additionally, before you start maybe landing some of these podcasts and media coverage, that you make sure that you have a place to grab emails when when let's say you've featured on a podcast, they link, people go to your site. If you don't have an automatic opt-in page or some sort of lead magnet or some sort of area where people can leave their email addresses, it's a missed opportunity because you want to be able to capture a lot of those leads and turn them into clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, we have all these different types of things that you can apply for. You can get on podcasts, you can get TV, you can get media, but I'm sure everyone is thinking that all sounds very dreamy, but like, how the heck do I even get started?
Yeah.
So let's start
Yeah.
from the very beginning. Low hanging fruit. You don't have money to pay for a PR professional. What do you start doing?
There's a couple really low-hanging fruit publications that are constantly like looking for coverage. Authority Magazine is one. Shout out, plug in your city. So in LA, it's shout out LA, shout out Atlanta, shout out Portland. Those are all really easy, low-hanging fruit that just kind of gets you into the media space. Basically, what they'll do is they'll just email you questions, you answer those questions, and they'll copy and paste exactly what you did into those publications. And they're not going to generate a lot of traction or traffic back to you, but it's a really good way to just be like, okay, I'm a little nervous about media, but I want to land something. Those are really low hanging fruit. Authority Magazine, shout out LA, Voyage. There's a few other ones in different cities. So I would maybe start there. I would also, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that where people are looking for guests for podcasts. If you want to kind of get started there and kind of get your feet wet, go on Facebook groups and start looking at like, there's a group called Need a Guest, Be a Guest, and go on there and just say, "Hey, my name is Mercedes Barba, and I can talk about, media pitching for entrepreneurs if anybody's looking for a guest." And a lot of people that way will be like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I want you on my podcast," or "Oh, can you talk about this?" or "Oh, I think I know somebody that could use that." And so those are really great ways to kind of be visible and kind of get your feet wet. And then once you start kind of getting a little bit of those, I would suggest we move to step two, which is reading stories that are in your niche, in your industry, looking at the reporters that are covering those, and maybe creating some sort of media list or Google Doc where you have all of those journalists in there and try to network with them, connect with them on LinkedIn, say, hey, on LinkedIn, you can send a message most of the time. Say, hey, so and so, like I saw this article that you did and I really enjoyed it. Just wanted to connect with you. My name is Mercedes. I can talk about XYZ in your, in the storytelling that you're covering. We call it the beat that journalist is covering. Um, and you never know, it could lend for a really interesting message on LinkedIn where the reporter is like, you know what, Mercedes, I do need somebody. Are you able to hop on the phone today at 2? And you're like, yeah, oh my God. A lot of the times too, what you want to do is just shoot them a note, shoot them an email. If you find a reporter anywhere, if you click the article and you click on their name, that'll take you to their bio page. It's called a byline page. And a lot of the times, email addresses of reporters will be there. Sometimes there's not, but 90% of the time there is. If there's not, I suggest looking at something like Rocket Reach, um, or maybe some other AI type tools where you can find email addresses, or find them on LinkedIn or even Twitter. A lot of journalists are posting like media opportunities on Twitter. So I would just network with as many reporters that are covering your industry as possible, connect with them, shoot them a note, say, hey, I really love this article that you wrote about Trump's tariffs and the stock market. If you're ever doing a story, I'm a personal finance expert and I can touch on these three things and more. Let me know. I'm here. And a lot of it too, and like this happens to me as a publicist, like I'll send a note and then I don't hear anything back. And then I'll send a follow-up a couple days later. And I call it the art of the follow-up. It's like they should write books on this because it's the follow-up that lands it. It's really the follow-up that's like where they're like, oh my God, Mercedes, yes, I loved your email and I forgot to respond. Oh my God, I'm so glad you reached out to me again. Right. And that goes in entrepreneurship in general. But that follow-up is very, very valuable.
Yes, that I've done that so many times. I'm just curious, Can you share, I mean, off the cuff, what would you say in a follow-up? What kind of language do you use?
Yeah. So initially, the the first email that you want to send, you always want to keep pitch emails super um uh easy to read. Like I say like 3 to 5 sentences tops, right? Like you don't want to overwhelm the reporter because when I was a reporter and I would get pitch emails that were really long and convoluted, I wouldn't read them because I don't have time to like sift through this story, right? If if I got an email that was like, "Hey Mercedes, I have an idea for you for Business Insider. Here's the headline." Something really grabby, and then let me know if you're interested in hearing more. Because a lot of the time, the reporter will say, "Ooh, I like that angle. Tell me more." Right? You don't have to like divulge it all in the first email. And if you don't hear back, it's totally okay. This is why the art of the follow-up is so valuable because there's so many reporters that are like working on deadline on one story. They may have seen your email, but they just forgot about it. And so when you follow up, keep it short as well. Say, hey, Mercedes, like I sent you this note a couple days ago. Just wanted to follow up. If there's any stories in the pipeline where you think I would be a good fit for, I would love to chat further with you about that. And if they don't respond again, I typically follow up 2 or 3 times and then I leave it because you don't want to end up in like a spam, email jail for reporters. Um, and that's why it's so important to target the reporters that are covering your specific industry. Because if you send a pitch email to a journalist that isn't covering something that is in your space, they're going to be like, oh, this girl doesn't know. This Mercedes doesn't know who she's pitching anyway. So we're gonna put her in jail. We're gonna mark her email as spam, so we never have to hear from her again. And that's just a place where you don't want to be. Um, yeah. So a lot of really good, it takes time to get it off the ground, but once you do, and once you really start networking with these journalists that are covering your industry, it really can take off for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love you're giving the real example of just literally a pitch headline. Tell me if you want to learn more. I also think there's something like leaving some to the imagination and piquing curiosity seems to be really important. I
Mhm.
found that a lot in my own connections, and I'll just share, from what Mercedes has shared with me, I have made so many relationships where I wrote one article for a reporter, and now I get emails from reporters all the time. They email me directly and just say, "Hey, I had such and such fall through. Can you write?" Or, "Hey, I have an article coming up on this. Can you respond in 48 hours?" So once you do it once, if you build that, you don't even have to build rapport really. You literally just write something that was useful and they will come back to you. So it just builds on itself, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. Journalists are always looking for sources. So if they have a really good source that they can tap into and that person is responsive and is actually sending and I know AI is like a big thing in our ecosystem right now. I love AI. I use it all the time, but do not use it to write any articles because then you'll get blacklisted. Um, if there's any ounce of AI copy in an article that you've written for Business Insider, they're going to be like, no. So, use it as a tool, maybe use it as like a pitch generating, idea something to use for that. But don't write articles with AI. That's one of my biggest like no-nos because they'll check.
Yeah.
They check. Yeah.
Okay. That's really helpful.
Mhm.
So when it comes to finding the reporters, it sounds like, we can Google people, we could be on a website. Let's say I'm on Go Banking Rates. I read something, I click on someone's bio, I look them up on LinkedIn. Should we be targeting, you talked about kind of going for the low-hanging fruit first, like the blogs or the easier ones to get into,
Yeah.
but what if someone really wants to get the Forbes article, the Business Insider? What tips would you have on crafting something different, or is it the exact same process?
It is the exact same process for Business Insider and maybe some other personal finance publications. They like tangible numbers, right? So Annie's article that was on Business Insider had very tangible numbers. It had our journalists like articles that are service heavy. Here are my 4 tips. Here are the 3 ways, right? If you want to get featured in Business Insider or something in like a financial publication, try to share some numbers. Say, hey, look, I built a business from $0 to $100,000 by doing these 3 things. Number one, XYZ. Is that something of interest to the Business Insider audience? And just because one reporter says no, like if someone's like, no, I don't think so, go to the next Business Insider reporter. There different reporters are covering, different reporters see stories differently. And if you reach out to one and they're like, I don't know, I'm not going to pitch it to my editor. And then you go to another one and they're like, ooh, that one's actually really interesting. I like that. I'm going to pitch that. It's a win, right? And a lot of journalists nowadays, the industry has changed so much that a lot of these journalists now are freelancers. And so they get paid per article that they write. So if you're pitching them a really good story, they're going to like fight for it because they want to get paid to write it, right? And so it's just a win-win across the board.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Mhm.
And this is also making me think, what about, I'm thinking niches of media features. So we have a lot of career folks in the room. We have career coaches. I know also a lot of wellness and health professionals are interested in this. What's the difference between going for something that is within your niche? So like Go Banking Rate for our financial
Yeah.
coach versus something more generic, like getting a CNN feature.
Wait, say that one more time.
So I'm curious for folks if they're thinking, should I go for something really broad like CNN, MSN, just regular news outlet versus going into a niche? Do you find any difference as far as conversion rate, like getting into the articles or the success of the article turning into clients?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's always like where you really want to start thinking of, and this is like where it's helpful to maybe have a publicist on your side to kind of guide you. But I mean the goal of media, A, is to elevate your expertise, right? And your credibility. Media can do that for you, but the number one reason is we want to generate more clients to you. So we want to target the media publications where your audience is reading. It's amazing that like if you get featured on CNN as like an expert source and something that is fantastic. And I'm sure you'll get clients from there, but maybe a lot of your clients are reading Business Insider or are reading Forbes, and if they see a media feature of you giving you that credibility, they're going to start following you, and they're going to get directed back to your site from that article. And that's why it's so important to capture all of those leads. Um, I come from the school of thought that all PR is good PR. Like you never know like what type of reaction you're going to get from a media feature, or what types of clients are going to bring in that you're going to bring in from maybe a CNN article versus like a CNBC Make It article. Um, so I come from the school of thought is like do an overarching reach, because it's all a numbers game too. The more emails you send, the more of a likelihood you have of getting something, landing something. Um, Go Banking Rates is an amazing publication. They're actually based in LA, or they're in El Segundo, I think, which is LA. But they're an amazing publication because they're a smaller brand. They're always looking for ideas, and they syndicate across to Yahoo Finance and other like AOL and MSN. So if you land something on Go Banking Rates, um, that's great because not only is it going to get Go Banking Rates eyeballs, but it's also going to get Yahoo Finance, AOL, MSN. And so a lot of these publications, the beauty of it is if you land one, you're going to get syndicated across these different media outlets, right? Media channels, and you're just going to get more eyeballs. So the media is it's such an incredible tool. And again, it's really not out of reach.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hmm.
So what about timeline when it comes to getting a media feature? So what's the general timeline? Walk us through from you pitching to something potentially coming out.
Landing something. It can take, and Annie, you can attest to this too. You can hear like nothing for like a month, or you can hear something back within like a day, right? It's like you can keep, and what I do is like I have different angles that I'm constantly working for my clients. I'm constantly like for example, this month is financial literacy month, right? There's an angle of financial literacy month. What's going on with the Trump tariff? Because I work with a lot of finance clients too. What's going on with Trump and tariffs in the stock market, right? That's another angle. And so the story that I'm pitching for CNN Business is going to be something totally different than I'm pitching for GMA, right? If I'm pitching something for GMA, it's going to be more consumer, the American, like the average American, like egg prices, gas prices, right? For CNN Business, it could be something totally different. So you don't necessarily want to keep the same pitch per publication. you really kind of want to structure it a little bit differently. And that's why it's really important to kind of know the publication that you are targeting, um, so that you can structure your story a little bit different for that audience. So, reading some of the other articles that maybe that journalist has touched on, and see, is there a different angle? Is there a different approach that you can pitch them that would generate interest, right? And you just want them to to open your email. Journalists receive hundreds. Like when I was a journalist, I would receive so many pitch emails a day. And especially now with AI and all of these AI tools, they're getting bombarded even more. So you got to have a story that like is really going to like grab the attention of someone in an inbox.
Yeah. Let's actually dive into the weeds on that.
Mhm.
So LinkedIn versus email. As a publicist, do you have one that you would more likely open a
Oh,
message?
I would receive pitch emails in my LinkedIn, and that was okay. I think email. I think if you're going to send a pitch, send it in an email.
Okay.
Um, Connecting with reporters on LinkedIn though, and just saying like, hey, I'm Mercedes, and I noticed that you wrote a story about this, and if you ever need any other sources, like I'm here, and let's connect because LinkedIn is such a beautiful tool. Like I'm such a LinkedIn fanatic. I love it. It's so valuable, the connections that you build, and then if people like it, their network can see it. And so connecting with journalists on there, journalists are really active on LinkedIn. They're also very active on Twitter. I have a couple journalists connections that I know that are active on Instagram, and they're looking for sources on their Instagram stories. So if they have a public Instagram, I would connect with them there, so that they can kind of see the work that you do, and you can see if they're ever looking for any sources. But LinkedIn is such an incredible tool. I'm also a teacher. I'm a professor at Mount Sac, which is a college close by Jeanette. Yeah, very near Cal Poly Pomona. But I teach a journalism class there. And I'm always telling my students, like, you guys gotta get on LinkedIn right now. And I think I need to like create a whole class session devoted to LinkedIn because it's such an incredible tool that not a lot of people are using. And when you do, you start realizing, oh, the power of it. So connecting with journalists on there is huge.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so we're going for the email, we're sending that email. Let's talk about subject lines.
Ugh.
Anything that has been like red flag, you're immediately going to delete, anything that's just boring, anything that caught your eye, like tell us all
You
the things.
know, um, if it's a pitch, we're talking about pitches. I would write in there pitch, colon, like write that because, you know, as they're sifting through a lot, well, what a lot of journalists do is they'll search in their inbox pitch, and then they'll see all the pitches that they get. So if you just have it like in the first sentence in your subject line, then there's a reason why you're interviewing them and then or emailing them, and the reporter is going to know, oh, okay, like this girl has a pitch for me. Let me read it real quick. Okay. I also suggest, if you start doing this, to have something called Streak, or any type of app that shows you when people open your emails, because you want to make sure that it's landing, or that it's actually getting read. So there's Streak, it's free. You can have it on your email, and it tells you when people open it, and the city that they live in, and how many times they opened it, and how many clicks, like they clicked around. Um, I do suggest maybe having some sort of headline in your subject line, like uh, finance expert for you, like or Trump's tariffs, something that is like catchy, that it's going to get them to open it. Expert source for you, or maybe something really interesting about your story. One of the things in journalism is, in your very, you always want to start, or you want to kind of retrain your brain to start thinking in headlines. So what is the most grabby, what is the most important part of your story? Annie, when we did that Business Insider feature, it was like, here's how this financial expert is shaving 20 years off of her retirement age. She's going from 65 to 45. And that is, from a journalist perspective, especially someone covering finance, that is a really very interesting, stat. And also, it had a lot of service. So it had a lot of like actionable tips that the reader could read, take away, and implement that into their own life. So when you are sending your pitch email, I would always write pitch, something really grabby and juicy. If you know the person, you can say like, hey, uh, hey friend, oh, long time no talk or something. Or like, say for example, you go on their LinkedIn and you saw that they went to NYU and you went to NYU and you're like, oh, hey, from a fellow NYU alum, right? Something that can kind of grab their attention. I always like to say the very first sentence too, you want to keep it really like personal. So hey, journalist friend, hey Mercedes, oh, I saw you wrote this story on XYZ. I really loved it because of this reason. I have an idea for you. Quick headline, something really grabby. And then if this is of interest for you for Business Insider, please let me know. I'm happy to give you more info, you know? And then always kind of keep track. I always have a Google spreadsheet of when I email reporters and then when I follow up with them. So keeping track of that is important.
Okay. So let's move from pitching, which we've kind of covered a lot of. So you've pitched, now you have landed something, and they're saying, we're ready, let's write the article or let's get an expert quote. Do
Yeah.
you have any suggestions for ways that folks can think about writing a quote that, number one, is something that a publicist wants to see and they're like, this is great, I don't want to make any changes to it. But number two, how people can think about how to use the quote to build their credibility, to potentially get someone more likely to click on their link. Any tips
Mm.
you can share in that realm?
Mhm. So number one, if you are giving expert quotes, well, don't use AI because that'll blacklist you. Write it in your own voice, right? Even if you have to voice memo it out to yourself, because a lot of the time when I first started in this industry, interviewing people via email was like a no-no. That was like not a thing. Like that did not exist 5 years ago, even before COVID. But now in this post-COVID like digital world that we're in with Zoom and all of that, a lot of journalists nowadays are taking emailed responses, and that's great. That's fine. A lot of the times the journalists will want to hop on the phone too. They'll say, "Hey, I want to hop on with Annie for 15 minutes. Like, can we get set something up?" Like, totally. Um, so you always want to when you're doing an expert quote or giving answers to the questions that the reporter is asking you, always make sure that you send a link back to your website and that your title is like, founder of Money Essentials for Women, and make sure you link that in there so that the journalist can just link your website back. That's like number one on how to get clients back. Um, and when you're answering questions, you always just want to show your expertise. It's even beneficial if you say something like, "Well, when I work with my clients, I've noticed, this and that," so that whoever's reading the article will be like, "Oh, wait, this person actually works, coaches people. Okay, interesting." Um, so that's a really good way to kind of get people back to you. But I would always, always make sure that they're linking your website back in their article. That's like huge.
Yep, absolutely. So if anyone has questions, I know I put this in the chat. Please feel free to drop them in. We're gonna wrap up with Q&A today, but if there's anything that's been on your mind, feel free to drop it in and we'll transition, mix in some Q&A right now. But Mercedes, I kind of want to pass it to you and just say, what are the most frequently asked questions that you're getting from clients? Because I think you know better than all of us. So you tell us more about what people are always asking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically everything we kind of touched on. Like, how do I even get started? And those low-hanging fruit, the Authority Magazine, the Voyage, the shout out LA, shout out Atlanta, whatever. Those are really good, like low-hanging fruit to just kind of get your feet wet and kind of get like in the ecosystem of this like journalism world, and journalism or media is such an interesting different arm of marketing that a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that they can implement into their own lives. I have two services where I coach entrepreneurs on how to do it, and then I'll also do it for you, right? I'm your publicist where I'll pitch you out. And so both arms of that are really good because you're learning like alongside me. And like Annie, you're learning along, what's my story? How do I structure, what I want to say? I'm working with a client right now. We just landed her a writing opportunity in Business Insider. And so I sat down with her and I'm like, all right, girl, this is journalism 101. We're going to walk you through how to write an article. Very first thing, we got to get your lead, right? In journalism, the lead is the first sentence. It's the most grabby part of your story. And then, working with the inverted pyramid and kind of structuring a story that way. But those are really important things that as you start getting into this world, you'll start to learn. And again, it's really not an out of reach thing. There's journalists that are always looking for entrepreneurs. Very, if you have an inspirational story where you can add service, some actionable tips for the reader to take away. Um, Journalists love those, right? Business Insider like eats those up. CNBC eats those up. But just remember, if you are pitching a finance publication, they're probably going to ask you for some sort of numbers and they're going to want to validate those numbers. So you have to be comfortable maybe sharing a tax return or a screenshot of your investment accounts or, something that really shows, or like maybe your Square portal, where it shows your income, so that they can validate that. Journalists are always needing to validate their information. So that's really important. But I think just starting to, if you want to kind of add media into your ecosystem, just start reading articles that are associated in your industry and really kind of put yourself in that person's shoes and say, you know what, their story is really interesting, but what about mine? What service or what tips can I offer? And write all of that down, and structure it into an email. I do have a guide. I'll put it in here. Um, it's a free guide where I actually have a template for a pitch email that you guys can just like plug and play and send it to a couple of reporters. Um, and it's a really, really valuable tool that a lot of my clients have been using that I have on this guide because I want people to understand that it's not out of reach. It's really doable. You can do it yourself. And yeah, if anyone has questions too, like ping me on Instagram and say, hey, Mercedes, do you know anyone in this, media company that would maybe cover this story? And if I do, I'll happily pass along a contact for you guys.
Awesome. Two more things that I'm thinking about. One is how do you come up with those grabby pitches? So I'm thinking, for example, again, we'll go back to a lot of folks in the room, our career coaches. Is it okay? Because a lot of people want to hear about the same things over and over again. So I'm thinking like 5 red flags on a resume. That's been said a million times.
Yeah.
Can you still pitch something like that? Or do you need to constantly be coming up with something really unique? So any tips on coming up with a punchy headline?
That's a great question. There are so the industry right now is heading in a very SEO. So what are people Google searching? And then media outlets are targeting that. So that's why you see a lot of these like how to update a resume, 5 tips, right? Because that's what people are searching. And media companies are creating articles that are going to capture that search volume. And so it is really valuable to pitch the media right now with those kind of service angles. Um, it sounds like every publication is like covering that story, but it's because they are. Because they're trying to target those, they're trying to capture those leads that people are Google searching. So I find it very valuable to say, hey, I have an idea, 5 tips for crafting your resume. Like, but make sure that you are pitching a publication that doesn't really have that already. Chances are they're probably going to be working on it very soon, especially if it's like a really popular topic. Um, but yeah, I mean, I hope that's clear. So kind of do a little bit of your research and say, oh, I wonder if Go Banking Rates has an article on like resumes. And go to their website, go to their homepage. There's typically a search bar at the top corner, and you can search like resume tips, and it'll populate all of the articles that they have on resumes, and find something that doesn't really exist and pitch a reporter that covers that space. Um, trying to angle it into something like 5 tips, that new college grads can do today, especially in like a volatile, if you peg it to something newsy, you have a really good shot of landing something because the journalists are always looking for something that is newsy. If you can somehow peg it to Trump's tariffs or the stock market or the economy or the price of eggs or whatever area that you can in your sphere in your niche, that's a good way to land it too.
Yeah, I love that idea of, I didn't even think about doing a search and then trying to find the niche within what they haven't written about. That's a
Yeah,
great idea.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
have any tips for folks that are less familiar with finding what's being searched right now? Do you have any tips on where people can go to find really common search terms, like searches for the last 30 days, searches that are popular right now?
Yeah, there's a really great website. It's called Answer the Public. Answer the Public is good. It's free. I think you can have like up to 3 free searches a day or something. And you can search like resume tips, and it'll give you like a circle of like what people are searching or what they have searched, and what the search volume looks like. You'll have to pay for it after 3 searches, I think, a day, but that's a really valuable tool to kind of look to see what are people searching in my industry. I know Google Trends is a really good one too. So going on Google Trends and looking at what are people searching right now? Like interesting. And then trying to target some of your pitches there.
I love it. I've never heard of this. I just pulled it up, so
Hmm.
I'm searching. This
Yeah,
is really
Answer the
cool.
Public's good.
Yeah, awesome. Um, Gosh, I had another question, but I can't think about it. Um, I think honestly, Mercedes, you have covered
Mhm.
so much. This has been
Yeah.
so helpful. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up there. We will both stick around, Mercedes and I, because I know we're available for the next 20 minutes. If
Hmm.
anyone wants to come stick around and ask personal questions or work through a scenario, happy to do so. But otherwise, thanks everyone for coming. This has been incredibly helpful, Mercedes. We
Yeah.
really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Course, of course. Thank you all so much. And just remember, like I'm here as a resource too. If there's any questions that you have, my website is there. So go ahead and find me on Instagram, shoot me an email, whatever works for you. And I am happy to guide you all through whatever I can, or maybe connect you with some of the journalists that I know that cover the space. But I know that in our entrepreneur world, there's a lot of opportunities for us, in the media. So it's time for us to get our shine. So
Yes. Awesome. Well, thanks again. Feel free to log off or stick around if you want to ask more questions. Thanks, everyone.
thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Awesome. That was very cool.
Yes, I'm gonna stop recording. If I
Yay.
can find.
Thank you, everyone. What an awesome group of entrepreneurs you have.